Welcome, fellow wanderers, to the Sleepless Bard. Tonight we journey to ancient Greece, where the mountains echo with song and the rivers run silver beneath starlight. Here, where gods walked among mortals and music held power beyond mortal understanding, there lived a young man whose voice could make stones weep. His name was Orpheus. Born of the muse Calliope, goddess of epic poetry, and the river god Eurydice, Orpheus possessed a gift that transcended the boundaries between earth and heaven. When Apollo, god of music and light, placed the golden lyre in his hands, the instrument seemed to sing before he even touched its strings. The trees would lean toward him when he played. Birds would fall silent to listen. Wild beasts would lay down their fierceness and gather in peaceful circles around his feet. Even the stones themselves would shift and settle, drawn by melodies that spoke to something older than words. But of all the wonders his music could conjure, none compared to the love he felt for a wood nymph named Eurydice. She was daughter of the oak groves, born of dappled sunlight and morning dew. Her laughter was like water over pebbles, her voice a whisper of wind through leaves. When she danced, flowers bloomed in her footsteps. When she smiled, the very air seemed to shimmer with golden light. Orpheus first saw her by a stream, where willows dipped their branches low. She was gathering water lilies, their white petals floating like small moons on the dark water. The moment their eyes met, time itself seemed to pause. He began to play for her then, a melody that had no name, a song that seemed to flow directly from his heart to hers. The music spoke of longing and wonder, of souls recognizing souls across the vast spaces of the world. Eurydice listened, and as she listened, she fell in love not just with the music, but with the gentle soul who made it. Their courtship was a thing of legend. Orpheus would play beneath her window as dawn touched the mountainsides. She would sing back to him, her voice joining his in harmonies that made the very gods pause in their eternal labors to listen. When they walked together through the forests, nature itself seemed to celebrate their love. Flowers opened before them, streams sang more sweetly, and the golden light of sunset lingered longer, as if the day itself was reluctant to end their time together. On their wedding day, the whole world seemed to rejoice. The wind carried flower petals like blessings, birds sang in chorus with the wedding hymns, and even stern Hades, lord of the underworld, was said to have smiled in his distant realm. But joy, in the world of mortals, is often as fragile as spider's silk in morning dew. One day, as summer reached its height and the meadows bloomed with countless flowers, Eurydice walked alone through the tall grass. She had grown fond of these solitary wanderings, these quiet moments when she could commune with the spirits of wood and stream that were her sisters. She did not see the shepherd Aristaeus watching from the edge of the grove. She did not notice how his eyes followed her movements, how desire had kindled something dark and hungry in his heart. When he stepped from the shadows and called her name, Eurydice turned with the innocent trust of one who had known only kindness from the world. But the look in his eyes sent a chill through her spirit, and she turned to flee. Through the meadow she ran, her feet flying over the soft earth, her breath coming in quick gasps. Aristaeus pursued, calling words she wouldn't hear, making promises that sounded more like threats. In her flight, her foot found the one place where danger waited silently in the grass. The serpent, coiled and sleeping in the warm afternoon sun, struck without warning. Its fangs sank deep into her ankle, and venom swift as winter night coursed through her veins. She fell among the wildflowers, her hand reaching toward the distant mountains where she knew Orpheus waited. Her last breath was his name, carried on the wind like a prayer. When Orpheus found her there, surrounded by flowers that were already beginning to wilt in sympathy, the world seemed to shatter around him. His lyre fell from nerveless fingers. His voice, which had never failed him, broke on a single, wordless cry of grief. For 7 days and 7 nights he held her cold form, refusing to believe that death could claim so bright a spirit. When at last they took her from his arms to prepare her for the funeral pyre, Orpheus retreated to the high places of the mountains. There, alone with the endless sky and the indifferent stars, he began to sing his grief. It was a song unlike any he had ever made. It held all the love he had felt, all the joy they had shared, all the future that would now never be. It was a song of such profound sorrow that the very mountains wept, their tears flowing down as new rivers. The trees shed their leaves, though it was still summer. The sun himself dimmed his light, unable to bear the weight of such perfect anguish. The gods heard that song, each note rising to Olympus like incense from a sacred fire. They heard, and they wept, for even immortal hearts can break when faced with love's true measure. But Orpheus sang not for the gods' pity. As his grief found its voice, a desperate plan took shape in his heart. If his music could move stones and tame wild beasts, if it could make rivers change their course and bring rain from cloudless skies, then perhaps it could move even the heart of Death himself. He would descend to the underworld. He would find Hades in his throne room of shadows and sing for the return of his beloved soul. It was a journey no living mortal had ever made. At the edge of the world, where the river Styx flows dark and cold between the lands of the living and the dead, Charon the ferryman waited with his ancient boat. "Turn back, young singer," Charon warned, his voice like wind through dry bones. "This river carries only the dead. No living soul may cross." But Orpheus drew his lyre close and began to play. His music spoke of love that would not be conquered, of devotion deeper than death itself. The dark waters of the Styx began to tremble, then to sing in harmony with his lyre. Even Charon's eyes, which had looked upon nothing but sorrow for countless ages, filled with tears. "Pass then," the ferryman whispered, "but know that the path you take leads only deeper into darkness." Beyond the river, in the realm of shadows, Orpheus walked paths that had never known sunlight. Here dwelt the spirits of the dead, pale and silent as morning mist. But as his footsteps echoed in that place of eternal quiet, and as his lyre sang its song of love and loss, the very air began to change. The shades gathered around him, drawn by music that reminded them of life. Tantalus, forever reaching for fruit that turned to ash, paused in his eternal hunger. Sisyphus, condemned to roll his boulder up the mountain for all eternity, let his burden rest as he listened. The Danaids, who carried water in vessels forever broken, found that for these few moments their jugs held their contents. Even the Furies, those terrible goddesses of vengeance, wept at the beauty of his song. At last he came to the great hall, where Hades sat upon his throne of black marble, with Persephone, queen of the underworld, at his side. These were the rulers of the dead, beings who had long forgotten what it meant to feel pity or hope. But when Orpheus stood before them and sang his love for Eurydice, sang of morning sunlight and laughter shared, of dreams cut short and hearts broken. Even these immortal powers felt something stir in their ancient souls. His song told of Eurydice's gentleness, her joy in simple things, how she would cup fireflies in her palms on summer evenings, how she wove flowers into her hair, how her eyes would light up when he played her favorite melody. He sang of their wedding dance, of promises made under starlight, of a love that death itself could not diminish. The song rose through the shadowy halls, echoing from walls that had never known such beauty. It spoke not just of his grief, but of love itself, love as the force that drives the sun across the sky, love as the power that makes flowers bloom and rivers run to the sea. When the last note faded into silence, the hall remained still as stone. Then, slowly, a tear fell from Persephone's cheek. It was the first tear shed in the underworld since time began, and where it touched the marble floor, a single white flower bloomed. "Your song has moved even our hearts," Hades said, his voice like distant thunder. "What would you ask of us, singer?" "Give me back my wife," Orpheus whispered. "Let Eurydice return with me to the world of light and warmth. Let her know again the touch of sunlight and the song of birds at dawn." The Lord of the Dead was silent for a long moment. Around them, the shadows seemed to hold their breath. "Your love has power, mortal," Hades said at last. "It has brought spring to the realm of eternal winter, tears to eyes that had forgotten sorrow. I will grant your wish, but there is a condition." Hope blazed in Orpheus's heart like a star kindled in darkness. "Eurydice will follow you from this place. She will walk behind you on the path to the upper world. But you mustn't look back. You mustn't turn to see her face until you both stand once more in the light of the sun. If you look back even once before that moment, she will be lost to you forever." Without hesitation, Orpheus agreed. What was such a simple thing to ask? He would climb the dark paths with perfect faith, knowing that behind him came his beloved, returning to life with every step. From the shadows at the edge of the hall, a figure emerged. Pale as moonlight, silent as morning mist, Eurydice stepped forward. Her eyes were fixed upon Orpheus, with a love that death hadn't diminished, but she could not speak, could not call his name. In this place between life and death, she was bound by silence. Orpheus turned toward the distant path that would lead them home. Behind him, Eurydice began to follow, her footsteps making no sound on the stone floor. Up through the winding passages of the underworld they climbed, past the rivers of sorrow and the fields of asphodel, where ordinary souls spent their eternity. Orpheus's heart sang with joy, even as he forced himself not to turn, not to look upon the face he'd loved more than his own life. He could not hear her footsteps. The dead make no sound when they walk. He could not hear her voice. She was forbidden to speak until they reached the world above. But he felt her presence like warmth against his back, felt her love following him like a promise made manifest. The path grew lighter as they climbed. Far ahead, Orpheus could see the first faint glow that marked the boundary between the underworld and the realm of the living. His heart hammered against his ribs. Soon they would be free. Soon they would be together again in the land of sunlight and flowers. But as they climbed those final steps, doubt began to creep into his mind, like poison into a wound. What if Hades had lied? What if this was some cruel jest of the gods? What if he climbed alone, and no beloved spirit followed in his footsteps. The silence behind him became a weight almost too heavy to bear. No breath, no whisper, no soft fall of familiar feet. What if she had fallen behind? What if she was lost in the darkness, calling his name while he walked onward, unknowing? Just ahead, the entrance to the cave glowed with daylight. A few more steps, and they would be safe. The warm air of the upper world touched his face like a blessing, but the doubt had grown too strong. Love itself became his enemy, for it was love that made him need to see her face. Love that demanded the assurance of her presence. Love that whispered he must turn and make certain she was truly there. At the very threshold of the world, with sunlight streaming down around him, Orpheus turned. For one perfect, terrible moment, their eyes met. Eurydice stood there in the shadows, just beyond the reach of daylight, her hand stretched toward him, her lips forming his name. Love and forgiveness shone in her gaze, even as the darkness began to claim her once more. "Orpheus," she whispered, and it was the first and last word she would speak in that place between life and death. "My love." Then she was fading, drawn back by powers older than mercy. Her form became translucent, then transparent, then nothing at all, only memory and the echo of her voice speaking his name. He reached for her, lunged back toward the darkness, but invisible hands held him fast. The living could not return to the realm of the dead. Behind him, sunlight poured down like golden water, and before him, the cave opening grew dark and smaller, until at last it sealed itself with stone. Orpheus fell to his knees at the threshold, his fingers clawing at the rock that now blocked his path. But the underworld had closed its doors to him forever. 7 years he wandered after that, seeking any path that might lead him back to her. His music, once so beautiful that it could charm the very stones, became a lament of such profound sorrow that those who heard it were moved to tears, but also to despair. He sang only of Eurydice, of love lost and chances squandered, of the cruel moment when looking back had cost him everything. He climbed the highest mountains and descended into the deepest valleys. He walked the shores of distant seas and stood in forests where no human foot had ever trod. But nowhere did he find another entrance to the realm of the dead. Nowhere did the earth open to let him seek his love once more. At last, his wandering brought him to the mountains of Thrace, where the women of Dionysus danced their wild rites beneath the moon. They had long been stirred to jealousy by his devotion to a dead woman, by his refusal to love any among the living. In their madness, they fell upon him like a storm, their cries drowning out the sound of his lyre. When their frenzy passed, and the dawn came pale and cold, Orpheus lay still among the stones, his body broken, but his lyre intact beside him. The Muses gathered his remains and laid them to rest with all the honor due to the greatest of singers. His lyre they placed among the stars, where it shines still on clear nights, playing melodies that only the gods can hear. But his spirit at last was free to seek the paths he had walked before. Down through the shadowy realm it went, past Charon's boat and the rivers of sorrow, into the great hall where Hades ruled. This time there was no need for songs or pleas. This time he had paid the price that all mortals pay. And there, in the fields of Asphodel, where spirits of the good find their eternal rest, Eurydice waited for him. They say that in that place, beyond time and sorrow, they walk together still. No shadow falls between them now, no doubt can part them, no glance backward can undo their union. In the realm where all stories end, theirs alone continues. Two souls who loved so deeply that even death could not diminish their devotion. And sometimes, on nights when the moon is dark and the world lies quiet, those who listen carefully might hear their voices joined in perfect harmony, singing of love that endures beyond the boundaries of mortal life, beyond the reach of time itself. This has been The Sleepless Bard, and until we meet again, listen well.